Is anybody out there? Oh, there
Here,
you are.
okay, yes. All right. Welcome to America This Week, ATW Live on Monday. I'm Matt Taibbi.
I'm Walter Kern.
Walter, you're wearing a hat. That's disconcerting.
I know it is, and I did that to just to disconcert. It's a punk rock and skateboard shop in Salt Lake City, I think. I was given this at a county highway reading, and my wife said it looked good on me. She rarely says that about anything, so I just have had it on since. Yeah.
Nice. Never take it off once you get a compliment like that.
Yeah.
Well, those slacks look good on you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, when you take off a hat, people say, "Oh, I see why you were wearing a hat." When I take off a hat, I've just begun. You know.
Right. Yeah. You still got the whole flowing mane thing going. So yeah. No, it's a good thing. So we got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about a bunch of things and finish off Candide and do some other stuff. But so the world is now flipping out because Donald Trump is threatening to federalize the District of Columbia, put troops in the streets because there are a variety of reasons, right? There was a serious incident involving a character named Big Balls that got a lot of press, and so we held a press conference this morning. But before that went out, we have a little bit of it's a small scoop, but like a little tiny one we want to do on the air here. So the District of Columbia wanted to preempt the hoopla about Trump's press conference by putting out a little press release that's entitled 2025 year-to-date crime comparison. And I want to preface all of this by saying I don't live in the District of Columbia. I don't know how bad crime is or isn't compared to previous years. I don't have anything to go on the way I might in New York City, for instance, right? Like I've seen noticeable changes in New York, but I don't know that that's the case in DC. But Trump has been claiming that there's a significant crime increase, so they put out this, okay? And what is it? It's a year-to-date crime comparison, and you'll see, for instance, the top line: 2024, 112 homicides; 2025, 99 homicides; sex abuse, 110 incidents; 2025, 55 of those incidents. And you see these percentage changes. They're all in the negative. Crime's going down. What's going on? What's the fuss? Or as they would say in Miller's Crossing, what's the rumpus? What are we talking about here if crime is going down?
Let's see if anybody. I'm going to check. Just pause a sec. Let's check if anybody has guessed over here on the comments.
Has anyone guessed? Do any of our readers yet guessed the punchline of this story? Has anyone guessed that no responsible reporters thought to reach out for to see what's up with those numbers? Because the first thing that jumps out to me is, gosh, they have a number already for homicides for 2025.
Exactly. That includes pre-crime, right?
Right. Yeah. How are they scaling out for the whole year?
Isn't the Philip K. Dick novel set, or at least the movie, in Washington D.C., the home of pre-crime?
It is. Yeah. Exactly. That was where they instituted the first pre-crime program. So they know how many murders there are going to be in 2025 already.
You thought, but actually, it's even simpler than that.
Actually, it's even simpler than that. So our own trusty Greg Collard of Racket, doing the job, right? Like, people oftentimes make fun of us reporters, and they should, because we suck in like almost every way. But the one thing we're supposed to do as a matter of routine is ask simple questions like, what are these numbers that you're comparing? Is one of them 12 months worth of stats and the other one 8? Or what? Right?
And the answer is
And the answer is, ta-da! Can we see the email that we got back? Let's blow it up just a little if we can. The information, this is from the Office of Communication, the Executive Office of the Chief of Police, Metropolitan Police Department. The information on that site is year to date. So the 2025 numbers are from January of this year to now. The 2024 chart are totals for the entire year.
Oh, wow.
Are you fucking kidding me? Like, seriously? They put that out and they hoped that, and they just assumed that that shit would go over. And you know what? It would have, if, Craig hadn't made a call. Let's take a look at what CBS was doing before the press conference this morning. They put a story up. It's headlined on YouTube, fact-checking Trump's press conference, but it's before the press conference even happens, okay? So let's just listen to what they say.
As he suggests, crime is everywhere where you are in the nation's capital, but can you fact-check that claim for us? What does the data show?
The mayor of Washington, D.C. emphasized over the weekend that the data, which was produced in concert with the Justice Department, shows a nearly 30% drop in crime from this time last year. The homicide rate down about 12%. You'll see some of the numbers here. It's been a downward trajectory since a spike in crime.
Dude, what I love about this is that it actually shows that crime is going up, at least murder, because we are now at the 2/3 point, which is approximately 33% less than the whole, but murder at the 33 with 66% reporting is only down 12%. It should be down 33%. Whoa.
Exactly. And as we're going to get to, murder is one of the only crimes that counts that when we talk about this shit. But anyway, is Scott McFarlane AI? Was that a real reporter? Can we go back to his face? He's gonna come back. Yeah, here he is. It looks like an AI, but yeah.
Spike in crime in this community in 2023. That being said, you've seen over the last 48 hours the evolution of security in Washington, D.C. We have federal agents now deployed along with the nearly 4,000 officers in the Washington, D.C. Police Department. Agents from the Washington field office of the FBI, from the U.S. Secret Service, from Homeland Security, from the U.S. Park Police. This is not a typical mission for some of these officers to be there on the front lines on the street trying to do traffic stops or patrol against crime. That being said, here in Washington, D.C., Errol, they are at the city level preparing for the possibility the National Guard eventually gets deployed here onto the streets. Wow. And they may have even less experience with actual street crime and traffic stops than the federal law enforcement.
All right, we get
all of this a change in compliance.
So,
dude,
I'm sorry. That's CBS Morning News, and they didn't fucking check. Like, are you like?
Not only didn't they check, they based their whole commentary around a false statistic, and then they went into it as though the National Guard in D.C. is some unprecedented deal, when in fact I don't know when they took down the chain link fences and let the guard go at the beginning. I think there was still National Guard at this point in the Biden administration, practically. I mean,
Washington. It looked like a Democratic national or a Republican national convention for years, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
It was a chain link fence maze. But sorry, I get ahead of myself. Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, proved beyond a shadow of doubt. CBS News, which has sent out Scott Pelley to college graduations to talk about the unfairness of its persecution and the end of journalism as we know it, just showed once again why no one believes it. No one should hold it in hallowed respect anymore. It is not doing the most basic job. Our producer on America This Week, though he is a crack producer and a good reporter, was able to scoop them, with one read of the statistics and one phone call to confirm.
And by the way, it's a question you have to ask when you look at it, because the numbers don't make any sense. You don't, if it had said through 8 months, then you could leave it be, but you can't, there's no way to
and they could have, if they'd wanted to be at all honest, they could have compared the first 8 months of last year to the first 8 months of this year.
Right.
It would have been a rough comparison and unusual, but it would have been something like apples to apples. This was comparing apples to half apples. I mean, this was comparing apples to apple slices.
Right. And we want to get into this a little bit because, look, personally, I don't give a shit about whether or not crime has gone up or down in Washington. That's not it hasn't been a burning issue in my life, and I don't know whether it's the right decision to federalize the city. I mean,
it's not quite that. It's not, Matt, as I understand it, the city can't be federalized without Congress. But there is the right to carry out a lot of law enforcement activities at the discretion of the president. So I think that's a little bit of a misnomer at this point.
Right. Well, either way, I mean, I don't want to comment on the wisdom of whatever policy change they're thinking of making, because that's not really what I feel strongly about here. What I will say is that you and I both have had experience in the area of police statistics.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly frustrating to watch people report on stories like this and not understand some basic things about how this stuff works. You had a story you wanted to tell about this, right?
Yeah. Crime statistics are suspect, first of all, all of them, even when we compare a whole year to a whole year. And the reason is that, there is no objective registry for them. They are the result of how much crime the police, basically choose to report. And back in the day, about 25 years ago, I did a story for Time magazine on the methamphetamine epidemic in the United States, but I concentrated it on one city, Billings, Montana. And I went out there with a police scanner night after night, weekend after weekend for a couple of months, and watched robberies. You would hear reports, somebody got beaten up, somebody got assaulted, someone was robbed, whatever. And it was like nothing I'd ever seen. I'd lived in Montana for a while. And yet, when I looked at the crime statistics for the city, they didn't seem to reflect what everybody was agreeing was this absolute, surge. And it was because the city was, to make a long story short, engaged in promoting itself to the larger society as a safe place to live. Come to Billings, relocate your business and so on. And like most small towns I've ever been a part of, it wanted to portray itself as safer than it was. And even in the midst of a kind of terrible plague. And I was called out in the newspaper. Even the photographer who worked with me for Time was called out. They said they wanted to serve my testicles at the next. There's a food event in Montana called the Testicle Festival where they grill bulls' testicles.
Oh, right, Rocky Mountain oysters.
Rocky Mountain oysters, and they said mine should be served at the next of those festivals for misrepresenting the beautiful Mayberry of Billings, where people were literally stealing tennis shoes at knife point so they had $3 to buy their next hit of meth. So I know that there's a lot of discretion, let's put it that way, in these statistics. you can stop going to certain kinds of calls. I see the same thing in my part-time home of Las Vegas, where, it's important to reassure the tourists that they're coming to a safe city. And so there's a reason to digging into how these statistics are generated in the first place. And anything like CBS, any outlet like CBS with the resources it has, should probably be doing that. But when they're not even examining on the face of it what the dates bracketing the statistics are, let alone how they came about, you don't have just malfeasance or negligence. You have a kind of willful cooperation in a, deception.
Yeah. And it's incredibly frustrating. So, well, let's just show do we have a shot from Trump's presser? Did he say anything on point about this?
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States. I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening. They've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
All right. So before we get to the Trump part, I want to tell my story about, because I spent years mired in police statistics for a couple of books that I wrote. One was The Divide, and the other one was I Can't Breathe. And I saw both sides of the fake statistics regime. So one of the things that happens is in any city that has a statistics-based police regime, and we're going to do a little The Wire reference in a moment, but if you've ever seen or heard of ComStat, in cities like New York, it's a real thing where they get all of the chiefs together and they have a sort of daily update on what's going on in the city, and then the top police officials will yell and scream at their inferiors, like their subordinates, and say, I want 200 arrests of X category, I want 150 of these, and I want and so they preordain how many kind of arrests and stops they're going to be, and that goes down to the captain level, and that goes down to lieutenants, and that ends up at the patrol level. Now what happens is the patrol guys will get a mandate that they have to stop. This is back in the stop and frisk days, that they have to stop so many people and that they have to write so many citations. But these guys don't want to get killed. They don't want to end up in a fist fight with some 17-year-old drug dealer who's fit and maybe carrying a weapon. So what they do is they pick off the weakest, sort of most unable to defend themselves type of people on the streets. Like I saw a sting that was a regular setup for homeless people who jumped fares to get to a homeless shelter. It's not on City Island. It's one of the islands on the other side, on the East River side. Roosevelt. Yeah, exactly. And so the cops would wait to watch homeless people jumping on a bus, and they would write a whole bunch of tickets to so they could say that they wrote up those citations. They would do the same thing when they stopped people. It was always over misdemeanor bullshit. This is how Eric Garner got killed, because nobody wanted to mess with real drug dealers in the street, or people who were committing actual crimes. They went after guys who were selling loose cigarettes, like Eric Garner, who additionally couldn't run fast because he was 350 pounds. So that's how you get your citation stats and everything, but it undercounts real crime, because what happens is you get a whole lot of nonsense citations, and at the end of the year it says, well, we wrote 680,000 tickets, but they don't tell you how many things they overlooked in that process. So the lesson and all that I heard from cops was, when you look at crime stats, only look at the stuff they can't cover up, which is bodies, right? Bodies, rapes, things like that. Like these things, they either happen or they don't. And you really can't write them up or down. Now, what do we mean by writing them up or down? I think we should probably drag out a scene from The Wire to show what we're talking about. Walter, you know, the whole juking the stats. Actually, can we show the other one? It's probably simpler. So in the scene from The Wire, what you'll here, this is a scene where a major, Bunny Colvin, is listening to his subordinates try to count the crimes in his district. And what they're doing is they're basically knocking down felonies to misdemeanors. And then finally he gets fed up and he's like, no way, let's just do it the real way.
Egg assault with a 2x4? I don't think so. Put that with a part 2.
This one too, assault by pointing. If you don't use a handgun, you don't get credit for waiving it, right? Larceny here. Hump wrote this up as a daytime B&E.
Fuck this. Do it clean.
Don't massage anything. Don't sex anything down. We give them the fucking truth.
What about Comstat, boss? They'll rip you.
Hey, it's $5 to my 30, right?
Fuck them if they can't take a joke.
And we should probably show the other one. The other one is just they carry this in this scene. What you see is that they do the same thing in education.
All this so we score higher on the state tests. If we're teaching the kids the test questions, what is it assessing in them?
Nothing. It assesses us. The test scores go up. They can say the schools are improving. The scores stay down. They can't.
Juking the stats.
Excuse me?
Making robberies into larcenies. Making rapes disappear. You juke the stats and majors become colonels. Been here before.
Wherever you go, there you are.
So it's just incredible that this is where we are, that they would put out the DC police would actually put out some bullshit numbers in the middle of this controversy, and like nobody notices. The whole country doesn't notice except for our own Greg Collard.
Yeah. Well, remember a few weeks ago, because we talked about it on the Greg Gutfeld show, so I do remember a graph that was put out to indict Trump for higher prices, inflation, and it was a graph of of price increases over the last few years, and wanted to show that they were higher than 2020, and almost all the increase had
oh, right. Yes, it had happened during
taken place between 2020 and 2024, and then they suddenly had the Democratic interest group had to withdraw the graph. Well, this is very similar. It is almost like we're being probed to see how stupid we are, and the media is being probed to see how craven it can be, or how blind it can be. Had Greg not found this would have passed into conventional wisdom, because tomorrow we won't be talking about it at all. How many times have we been fooled? I want to go back. Have they pulled this one before? Have the year-to-date trick? I'm not sure. Or is it, a further descent into statistical nonsense? Because I think Americans, maybe trained by sports, have come to believe that statistics ultimately are a reliable indicator of reality. But then again, we just had Trump firing a person from the Bureau of Labor Statistics over what he believes are deceptive employment statistics. Aren't we in the age of AI? Isn't everything supposed to get firmer and more, more credible now in the number world? And why is it getting less?
Well, the reason it's getting less is because we have worse journalists who aren't watching this stuff and who politicize the results. And we're going to talk in a little bit about some other recent victims of the ongoing purge of the once mighty mainstream media. But one who, about whom we've already discussed is Glenn Kessler, who's the fact checker extraordinaire, who's now on Substack. And he wrote a big Substack thread. If we can see, this is on.
And just one pause here. The CBS clip was entitled "Fact Checking," was it not? Fact check. Yeah. That was not. It wasn't that they just got it wrong. It wasn't that they just ignored the obvious. It's that they labeled it a fact check, where we're expecting extra diligence.
I'm sorry, Walter. This is also a pet peeve of mine. The whole concept of fact checking as a vehicle really bothers me, because it's not really a thing. Fact checking is what we used to call journalism.
Exactly. It's like segregate. Right? It's like segregate. Let's segregate out the fact part of journalism and make it an extra special attraction, and then let's get it wrong.
Right.
All we got wrong was the fact check part.
Yeah. All we got wrong is the entire thing that we do. And let me say, Walter and I both have written for sort of major magazines, right? So we and newspapers, but magazines are where you get the more thorough treatment, where you have to work with actual fact checkers, right? In the era before fact checking was a public phenomenon, fact checkers existed, but they don't do this. They don't do the thing that Glenn Kessler does. Fact checkers, all they do is make sure they protect the brand and they protect against litigation. Their job is to make sure that the text is defensible as reporting. It's not trying to establish truth, right? All they're trying to say is we did enough to say that we didn't commit libel. We checked. We had some substantiation. We believe this to be true. Next, right? We're not.
But Matt, they also protect against scandal. And when I was the national correspondent for the New Republic, the New Republic had extremely stringent fact checking because of a guy named Stephen Glass. And what Stephen Glass had done is write feature after feature for the New Republic, all about events and incidents that he had completely made up, okay, or partly made up in some cases, and such that it became a Hollywood feature film, Shattered Glass or whatever it was. So the New Republic had been basically writing fiction for quite a while, and that's happened at the Washington Post. It's happened in a lot of places.
New York Times, yeah. Jason Blair was another one. He was like smoking crack with one-legged hookers in New York while his byline was in Cleveland and shit. Like
exactly. But here's where I'm going. It's not quite obvious. Because of these scandals, they had to, or at least pretend, to redouble their fact-checking efforts at these magazines, because they had been caught with people who were making stuff up. But then they leveraged the fact that they had done it wrong, and that the audience had become aware of this thing called fact-checking through the scandals at these places, to start checking everybody else. Because what fact-checking is doing in the modern era, in the Kessler era, and in the CBS pre-fact-checking Donald Trump's press conference that hasn't happened yet, is they're scolding others. In other words, after these sensational instances of getting everything wrong themselves, America became aware of this fact-checking operation. And then they, instead of turning it inward, turned it outward on everybody else, because I can tell you that at the same time America became aware of these magazines fact-checking Donald Trump or fact-checking whoever, the actual fact-checking departments inside the magazines and the newspapers shrunk.
If they existed at all.
If they existed at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So they go ahead.
So they cut it out for themselves and started doing it for everybody else and then getting it wrong.
I mean, the sheer balls of that, right? to screw up such that you need to institute these public features to sort of restore your level of trust with audiences. And I remember, because it wasn't just Stephen Glass, it wasn't just Jason Blair. We also had enormous episodes of just missing basic stories, like the WMD situation. Like we're talking about, like, people have this idea that the facts that slip through in journalism happen, in the heat of battle. Like, it's something that's buried in paragraph 19 that gets by a sub-editor at, in a late shift or something like that. But the WMD stories were things that were approved by the very highest editors with days to think about it. They weren't like breaking news stories where they just got it wrong. They actively put stuff out that was not true, that they know they couldn't prove.
And there were two more scandals that, even though they're not quite as grave as those, I think captured the public imagination. One was the UVA rape scandal.
I was there for that. Yep.
At Rolling Stone. Yeah.
Well, I came back after that happened, but
yeah. And another was, I forget where it happened. There was another fraternity that was accused,
the Duke thing.
Yeah, the Duke thing.
The Duke lacrosse thing. Right?
Duke lacrosse. Yeah. Yeah, that's how we headline it in the mass memory. And so between all of those, from WMD down to UVA, you had a real crisis in credibility for the press. And it continues today with CBS, editing maybe not as terribly as some would have it, the Kamala Harris interview and so on. In other words, cobbler, you have no shoes, turn it inward. But instead, they did this interesting thing where they made fact-checking something they did for the rest of us, while cutting their own staffs and not really, I think, ever addressing the credibility crisis that had arisen in, between about 2000 and 2015.
Okay, hold on a second. We have somebody telling us that the email that we got from the Metro Police was not correct, and that actually there were 190 homicides last year. So it was year to date this year too.
Well, what? We're only in August.
Yeah. So the 112 would be. So when they say the 2024 chart or totals for the entire year, they didn't tell us something accurate.
What?
That's what somebody's saying.
Who's somebody? Somebody at the Washington Police?
No, one of our commentators is saying that.
Oh.
So, well, let's check that out. If that's true, then
what?
So, by the way, somebody's asking about Tawana Brawley. I remember Tawana Brawley. My father wrote a book about that story. He was the lead reporter at CBS News, the CBS affiliate in New York when that happened. And yeah, that was another example of one where everybody was way out over their skis on that. But hey, maybe we are on this situation, so we'll find that out. But either way, we were told.
I don't know, that Washington D.C. Email was pretty definitive, Matt. I'm sorry. they actually spelled it out for us. So
2024 chart are totals for the entire year.
Yes, we know that. It's the
Okay.
2025 that we're concerned about, which couldn't be a total for the entire year since we're still only 2/3 of the way through it.
Right. Well, it's possible that they just wrote that incorrectly, and they should have said the 2024 totals were for January through August. I don't know why they would tell us that then, but either way.
Wait,
But
I can settle this. Go down. Go down. What does this say? Year-end crime statistics, offense. For the entire year, it was 187.
Okay.
They claim that it went down from that in 2023. Okay. Now 2024 that's the total for the entire year.
Well, if that's what it is, that's what it is. And we just made a whole bunch of jokes about nothing, but
what are you talking about? I mean, we're still not finished with this year.
Well, right, yeah. But
they're claiming that 112 only represents up until August of last year.
Yeah. Well, that's what our commenter is saying.
They must have information that we don't, because nowhere here nor in the email that we received is that stated.
Yeah, well, look, sounds like we got it wrong, so we're admitting it. But
how do you know that we got it wrong? I'm still unclear on that.
Well, just looking at those numbers, if it is 187, that makes sense. It just, I don't know why they would tell us that. So now we got to go back and we got to check. It's so frustrating. But this is why you go through the process. So,
Matt, what? I'm not taking back this level of satire until they can absolutely prove it, because until Showtime, we had no awareness.
Well, I mean, it's kind of on us. It's on me actually, because I thought I looked at that and I thought that is so fucked up. How can they do that? How can they possibly do that?
I'm deputizing our comment section to go look into this and come back.
Right. Well, no, it's not. Yeah, it's a little bit egg on face, but we're admitting it, which is what that's how this process works, right? So, and when you do get it wrong, you don't just cover your eyes. You look at it in the face and you try to determine what exactly happened, and that's what we're doing. So
somebody said, ask ChatGPT.
Right. But either way, let's get back to the original point. Okay, that's a little boo-boo, but look, this is how it works, right? This is how mistakes happen, by the way. Like, sometimes they happen because you're told something by an authority and you think that that's, good enough to go on. But and one thing they don't tell you about when we talk about fact checking is that the discussions between fact checkers, editors, and reporters are often heated and contested, because it's not always it's almost never clear what exactly you're dealing with. So you will get, it's just like Minority Report. You get minority votes in the fact checking discussions, where somebody says, yeah, well, I think it's defensible that somebody said this, and therefore we can claim X, right? And then two other people will say, no, I don't think that's what this means. And and you won't be able to get it clarified by print time. So my solution to that is always to kill it, usually, and just not deal with it if it's disputed. But sometimes editors feel strongly and they will stick something in, like I just did. But the idea, one of the things that the fact checking, these little features in newspapers did is they created in people's minds the idea that things can be absolutely true and absolutely false, and it's almost always disputed. It's almost always a matter of opinion. It comes down to, in many cases, whom you believe. Like sometimes there'll be a report by an authoritative source that says somebody has been, like Carter Page was judged to be an agent of a foreign power, right, by a FISA court. But he wasn't an agent of a foreign power because the FISA court had been lied to. So you always have to hold out the possibility that there's error in there somewhere, and not firmly stamp on what you're saying that, it's absolutely correct or it's absolutely not correct. You can always get something wrong. So that's what the Glenn Kessler thing always drove me nuts about. Well, not just Kessler, PolitiFact, Snopes, et cetera, that they're pronouncing a verdict, whereas in journalism, you're saying this is what we think. We'll put our whole weight of our organization behind this, and if it turns out not to be true, we'll tell you that. But
right.
We believe this, right?
Well, okay. So to summarize the incident that just occurred on America This Week Live in front of the audience, yes, you just saw inside the back room of journalists, oh no, look, that. I'm still not convinced, by the way, Matt. I'm still not convinced we were in error. But maybe we were. The point about fact checking in general, though, is this: it has become a weapon, and it became a weapon when it was asserted that Trump was a big liar, and that, in fact, we had to use a level of scrutiny around him that we had not used before. Do you remember there was a time when they were reporting like Trump has now lied 867 times in a week or whatever, and that, like crime statistics, is a discretion-based judgment. How much politicians lie, and one thing that I found in my career as it wound down at, let's say, Harper's during the Russiagate business, when I sort of had diverged from the pack, was that whenever I wrote a column that was at all accepting of the fact that Donald Trump was president, it merely had to stipulate that he was president, and it wasn't the end of the world or something. Fact checking was used in my pieces as a almost aggressive way of getting me to rein in my opinions. In other words, I was checked on things that I would never have been checked on in the past, that I wouldn't have considered facts. It starts to be used as a tool to constrain speculation, figurative language, and other things, I mean, you could there was a point at which you could say, Trump is president, and they would say, well, yes, but twice impeached, to be fair. And so I found that as time went on, it became code for proving the dishonesty of the Times and of this administration. And there was a kind of bounty on, factual material that was in some way injurious to Donald Trump that there hadn't been before.
Yeah. And that's really all it was. It was, the columns were disingenuous on their face because the things that they chose to check, like, for instance, a lot of the fact checks, during the COVID era for these fact-checking sites like Snopes or PolitiFact. What they would do is they would take some stupid assertion on Facebook or on social media, and then they would fact check that, right? Like this pulled out of my ass, line about the vaccines, carrying microchips or whatever it is incorrect, and they wouldn't check other things, right? So you get, yes, you can get an easy false by doing that, but it was the body of things that they weren't checking that was significant.
The best example I had was when I interviewed a Democratic voter who had voted for Trump, and the staff at Harper's came back to me and said, "Prove they're a Democratic voter." And I said, "Well, she just told me she was a Democrat." They said, "We want to see a picture of her voter registration." She had to go down and somehow go to the courthouse and get a record that proved that she was a registered Democrat before they would let me call her one in the piece. I'd never experienced that level of skepticism. You see people all the time on TV who they say, are a Democratic voter, or they interview them and they say, "But I'm voting for whoever," or a Republican voter who's voting for a Democrat, and so on. I've never seen them have to produce proof of that. And
yeah, well, that also happened. Go ahead.
That's how it got for me. I mean, whenever I was saying something that was a little bit, contra the narrative, I was chapter and versed.
Right. Yeah. And that did start to happen more and more. You also start to notice sometimes with fact checkers, like for the most part, the ones I worked with were fantastic, I have to say. Like they put up with very difficult egos. They know it's a thankless job. They got to stay late. They don't get paid particularly well, and they get overruled if the writer throws a big enough of a fit, and the editor is inclined to agree, and all these other things. So it's a tough job. It's a thankless job. They don't get a lot of credit for what they do. But sometimes, there's also this element of like, what? Like, I don't have a byline in this story, and that's because they don't see my hidden genius. So I'm going to try to shade this thing in a way. I want to put my own little stamp on this, whether people see it or not. And that's frustrating, right? That's like the same thing as when you're playing a basketball game and there are too many calls by the refs. You want to let them play a little bit. But what happened is that show went public in the Trump era, and Kessler just wrote a thing in Substack at his new home saying, while it was called "Why I Left the Washington Post," and he said, "There's a conundrum. If most of your readers are liberal, how do you attract conservatives without losing your existing base?" So his idea is that because things that are true will repel conservatives, how can I do my job and still attract conservative readers? Well,
because truth has a liberal bias, he's saying.
Yeah, essentially. And look, this is from the paper that that got so many different things wrong, asserted over and over again. For instance, that there hadn't been FISA abuse. They had to issue 8 corrections at once when I did the Hamilton 68 story, and that wasn't even they undercounted them.
And let me jump to a philosophical plane here for a moment. In the age of fact checking, we also got wrong that the president was a basket case. Okay, in other words, all of this attention to detail, this supposedly scrupulous checking of facts, missed the nose on the nation's face, which was that Joe Biden wasn't competent, wasn't together, didn't know who he was or where he was. We had endless little fact checks. Did Glenn Kessler check whether he was, suffering from dementia? Did Did Jake Tapper? Did anyone? So I guess what I'm saying is not seeing the forest for the trees is another, I think, feature of the fact-checking era. Big hoaxes, maybe, and huge, enormous phenomena, such as the president's incapacity, were missed. At the same time, Pinocchios were handed out for all sorts of little things.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this last week. Why is that? Like, how can that happen? Because we're in this era where, you know, with AI, with all of these anti-disinformation mechanisms, and which, by the way, are also based heavily on things like the International Fact-Checking Network, Pointer, right, PolitiFact. These are all buttressing the overall accuracy of, they lead to the authority calculation for AIs, right? So all those operations are really important for creating this sort of endless wheel of like confirmation bias. But what Kessler said is the exact inverse of what we said last week. He says fact checkers are getting easier to ignore. He said this in an article with the CJR of all places, which, you know, again, as we talked about, I have a big beef with them because they're even ignoring their own reporting from Jeff Girth and in talking about all the Russiagate errors and praising, you know, the staff of the New York Times. But he says fact checkers are getting easier. No, actually, fact checkers are having an easier time like avoiding having to deal with things like the president being a vegetable, or
this reminds me of the Colbert. This reminds me of the Colbert termination. Everyone now who is leaving the stage in journalism and, you know, entertainment, even in the case of Colbert, is making sure they have a last hurrah by framing what they're doing as some sign of, you know, the decline, the fall, the coming apocalypse. The reason they're getting easier to ignore, Glenn, is because of you. They became almost, I became almost obligated to ignore them because of you. You got so many things wrong. You got so many things wrong that didn't matter, while missing so many things that were big, that I realized that your endeavor is rather meaningless. And now you're coming out and pretty much affirming that you think factuality has a political bias. And I kind of suspected you thought that all along, you know,
right.
And indeed you did. So whether it's, you know, Stephen Colbert losing money or Glenn Kessler losing, how can I put it, losing legitimacy and also, I think, value. The Washington Post has to cut something, you know, they're not doing well. They had
to cut a lot of things, but we'll get to it. Mm-hmm.
Right. And ultimately that has to do with money. Ultimately, what we're seeing across the board is all kinds of places, and year over year statistics are kind of important here too. I saw some about cable news shows the other day that were shocking to me. I mean, the audience decline, and I would guess the revenue decline, is startling. And but with each of these people losing their job, it's as though we've lost the American way. And I have yet to see one of those arguments made that I find convincing, frankly.
Yeah, no. And that's true. And look, it's not just about the factuality. And by the way, we just got something wrong in the show today. This is what getting wrong looks like. For people who don't remember, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. And you got to eat shit sometimes. You step in shit, and you got to show everybody the shit. That's how it works. When you don't, what ends up happening is people just guess that it's there, right? And they stop believing you after a while, and it starts to become an audience problem. Anyway, this obviously dims a little bit of the our ability to enjoy the Schadenfreude. I don't know, it's not Schadenfreude. I've had mixed feelings about the next one. Can we look at SOT 1 on about Howard Stern?
Here's what we know. According to multiple reports, Howard's contract is up at the end of 2025. One story claims that while Sirius is planning to make him an offer, they don't intend for him to take it. Yesterday, as cancellation rumors spread,
I'm breaking into the channels.
Howard, who was on hiatus, briefly broke into summer reruns to go live, not directly addressing the cancellation headlines, but reassuring fans he'd return next month for now.
We will be back, though, very soon. I've been refueling, so to speak. We're back live on Tuesday, September 2nd.
So this is the Howard Stern thing is such a weird story because I don't know. I grew up in the era when Howard Stern was kind of a pioneer in the media business for breaking through that fourth wall and sharing with audiences how fucked up everything was and how prudish and how up its own ass, right? And how phony all of the conventions of media were. Remember, like he was famous for that one thing. He put it in the movie Private Parts, where he wouldn't do the tagline. You know, I forget what it was. Was it WNBC, right? Like that whole thing. He wasn't anybody's. He wasn't a company man. He wasn't an establishment figure. And suddenly, in the Trump years, Howard Stern transformed into this like shrieking old harpy who did nothing but recite like boring political propaganda and chastise people. And I think people also forget how enormous his contribution was before that point, because Howard Stern single-handedly, I think, made it possible for satellite radio to continue to exist. And you know, he was the reason that they had enough subscribers to force car companies to put it in your cars and stuff like that, right? That in the NFL. And for him to suddenly like fall off a cliff and become this establishment figure who you know, decided that he hated people who, not only did he hate people who voted for Trump, but that he wanted people who didn't get the vaccine to suffer, and all these are really brutal things that didn't sound like him. Right. I don't know, Walter, do you have an epitaph or an obit for Howard Stern?
Well, okay. Everybody has a different experience of Howard Stern. Mine was that he became popular in, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. And he published that book, Private Parts, with the same editor that I had in 1992.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah. Her name was Judith Regan. And I read his book and I started listening to him, thinking that I had missed out on this, you know, great phenomena. They didn't have Sirius yet. And I thought he was funny. I thought he, you know, was obscene in a way that was refreshing, I guess, to hear on the radio, new, different. I couldn't believe New York got to hear him all the time and so on. But he wore out his welcome with me incredibly quickly. I felt like I'd heard the whole gamut of Howard Stern humor, you know. And so then I just started paying attention, and he got on Sirius Radio, which is a thing I love because I live in an area that has poor terrestrial radio coverage, and I do a lot of long distance driving across the West. So I'd hear him again in his Sirius incarnation, and I thought, wow, it was overkill. It was endless. They had about 4 channels of Howard Stern, Howard Stern's greatest hits, and I couldn't believe how little he had grown, not been listening. And then all of a sudden I stopped listening again. And then when I turned it on again, he had become this COVID and orthodoxy enforcer who used every bit of hip, outsider, shocking credibility that he had accumulated to go after regular people.
Right, who didn't want to get the shot correctly, as it turned out in many cases, right? And again, he never acknowledged that.
It was like being lectured by John Lennon on the sanctity of marriage or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was like, what? When did he turn into a preacher? When did he turn into the, how can I put it, mass media version?
He was an orthodoxy enforcer.
Yeah. He became an enforcer, and that just for his brand and for what I expected was so discordant that I vowed never to listen to him again. Now, when I see this story come up, I'm amazed that they were still paying him as much as they did. He had a $500 million contract.
Right. It was 8 years too late. I mean, he checked out of the comedy business a long time ago.
But maybe that's what you do when you get a long-term contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Because remember, Colbert has 9 months left. He can do anything now. I mean, I
would hope that he would, but he's not going to.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. I thought that was called FU money, but instead of the FU going to the powers that be, it was going to the little people who were not acting according to Howard's newly elitist views.
Yeah, and I see we have a listener, Christopher Davis, 2847, saying once Imus was gone, Stern was in the clear. I should point out, I was kind of friends with Don Imus and was frequently on his show, and I always thought Imus, first of all, was sort of naturally frosty, disliked taking instruction from anybody or being part of a group. He couldn't help being difficult, right? Like that's kind of the standard position of a shock jock or a shock, journalist. Like Hunter Thompson was another person who was just never going to be an order taker, right?
But you want to know the difference between you're talking about Imus right now.
Imus was also wittier in the classic sense. He was kind of like the American version of one of those British sort of wordsmiths who always had something funny to say about any subject, right? And it wasn't part of one. It wasn't the same shtick over and over and over again. Like it was just the way he put together the phrase that I thought always made it, and it was thoughtful, I thought. But anyway, go ahead.
He was dry. But you see, in retrospect, the change in Howard Stern wasn't that much of a change, because the thing that was breathtaking about Howard Stern is that he was an open sadist.
That's true too.
He had always he had always punched down. He punched literally down at midgets or little people. He punched down at women.
Dana Plato.
Yeah, especially women who didn't have much. He punched down at people who were has-beens or were over the hill, and ultimately he punched down at half of America. But I think, never changed in the sense that he was always about standing above and kicking. He was dwarf bowling or whatever. It was the thing that caused you to suck in your breath is, can anyone really be this mean, this cruel?
Yeah. And look, I like a good mean joke as much as the next person, but comedy is a fine line. Like the whole point is
But Hunter Thompson was, but you threw Hunter Thompson in the mix, which is what occasioned me saying that, because Hunter didn't do that. Hunter wasn't about taking it to the little people. He was about taking it to the big people.
No, right. Yeah. I mean, like, all of his best jokes were, you know, Nixon was so crooked he had to screw his pants on in the morning, that kind of stuff, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, they were aimed at people who, you know, were part of the establishment or whatever it was. And he just, but you're right. Stern always had that thing about him that was mean, and he reveled in being mean. And I guess what I'm saying is there's a place for that in comedy, but it's a very fine line. Like, you can't stick a toe over that line at all. And but it came out, like, when, you know, with that whole bit about Trump supporters and all of that mugging he did with Hillary Clinton, who had exactly the same attitude, right? Like, about the deplorables and how, you know, I got the votes in the places that had the most GDP, and that sort of snobbish, looking down at everybody attitude, which just it does not go over with mass audiences. Like, you can't. What made Stern in the early days is because he came across as the common man's revenge against the upper class jerk or the celebrity, right? And even though I don't think that was really where his head was at most of the time, that's the part he played, and you know, he stopped playing it after a while.
He was an elitist scumbag. Okay, I mean, he tried to be both at the same time. And the scumbag who, you know, would make fun of women, who would, you know, bring strippers on the show and do things like that, and you know, trap them in sort of prisons of sexual innuendo in which they would squirm. And then became a member of the Hamptons class or whatever it was. But
yeah, where you couldn't get massages on the air all day long anymore.
Right. But what were his numbers? See, that in one of the articles I just read, his numbers have fallen in a shocking way. I mean, his ratings. Did you see that piece where they had gone from?
Yeah, I mean, what's the New York Post? That story's up there. Hang on a second. What does it say? Yeah, his audience has dwindled from 20 million a day to 125,000. So that's a pretty significant drop.
That's not instant billionaire level entertainment. That's not king of all media. King of 120,000 is not enough to keep you going. But once again, it will be cast, I'm sure, as some kind of ominous harbinger of, I don't know what, fascist rule, because he can't pull an audience anymore.
Well, I mean, I have a thesis about this whole thing that I haven't quite been able to put together yet, but I think the transformation of the Democratic Party from a party that aspired to be legitimately the party of the working person, and for a long time was kind of forcibly linked to those folks by the support of the unions. They had some kind of connection, but when do
you think that stopped, though?
NAFTA was right.
It stopped under Clinton.
Yeah, Clinton was the reinvented version of a Democrat. The DLC came up with, and the new formula was: we're going to start taking money from Wall Street. We're not going to depend on unions for get out the vote. We're going to compete financially during campaign seasons, which means we're going to have to give away some stuff policy-wise, and we're going to
everybody's jobs. We're going to give away everybody's jobs,
which are going to go to China, right? And so initially, it's a betrayal of the working class, right? And what they've done is they've rationalized that betrayal by hating those people. because they now vote for somebody like Trump, which is an absolutely rational thing to happen. Like, you know, when those voters got sold out, and, you know, you go to a place like Youngstown, Ohio, or where, I mean, Walter, you know, there's a million places that used to be somewhere and just went through these terrible catastrophes, and they're pissed off. And of course they are, right? But we hate them now. Like, we hate them for reasons like they won't take the shot when they're ordered to. They vote for the wrong person. But of course they would rebel against both the Democratic Party establishment and the Republican Party establishment, right? Because we can't forget that those voters leveled both parties, essentially, right? But it's people like Stern who helped rationalize the idea of hating the victim in this case. I mean, like, you know, there are certain, obviously, attitudes I don't agree with in the MAGA movement, but the fact that it exists makes all the sense in the world, right?
Right. I mean, we're relitigating my entire you know, platform in saying that. I mean, everywhere I've ever lived that wasn't New York City experienced a deep economic hollowing out, certainly post NAFTA, and so I'm the least surprised in the world that there's such a thing as MAGA. But in the case of people like Howard Stern and so on, you have an interesting transformation, because he supposedly was talking to Joe Lunchbucket back when, you know, he supposedly voicing, yeah, exactly, the Jersey way and that kind of thing. Once the Democrats had given up on the working class, not just given up, but sold it out, once they had become the avatars of financialization, they had to have a continuing reason to exist. And that reason to exist became increasingly abstruse civil rights movements, basically. You know, they became a party about attitude rather than how much money do you have, Mr. Working American, Mr. Middle Class American. And so, and Howard was someone who I think charted that change himself, because the people who were unvaccinated that he was talking down to were, in a lot of cases, minorities. I mean, the vaccine uptake was quite low among Black Americans.
Well, you can understand why, right? I mean,
well, yeah, the Tulsa, you know, Tuskegee experiment, excuse me, things like that. So he became an attitude enforcer too, and so in that sense, his parabola is like that of the party in general.
So another person who became an attitude enforcer, and it's kind of interesting that she's out on her own. We talked about her before, but Jennifer Rubin, who was sort of like the neocon, I guess, ish voice on the editorial page of the Washington Post. Can we see Satu? Like, this is a smattering of her attitudes. She popped up on my radar recently because the one-time conservative voice of the Washington Post did some kind of column where she was just singing the praises of Zohran Mamdani, and it's not that I can't stand Mamdani necessarily, but it was so infuriating to see this person who posed as one thing for years talking about I don't know. We'll see. Let's just listen to her sot here.
What we should be doing is shunning these people. Shaming these people is a statement of moral indignation that these people are not fit for polite society. It's not only that Trump has to lose, but that all his enablers have to lose. We have to collectively, in essence, burn down the Republican Party. We have to level them.
People ask me all the time, why is the media so ramsey-pamsey? And there are two explanations. One is they are convinced that if they would just move a little bit to the right, all those MAGA readers out there, now you'll notice the contradiction in terms, MAGA readers would pick up the Washington Post and they would have more readers. What is the logical fallacy here? Yes, reader.
I'm Jen Rubin.
And I'm Norm Eisen.
I am here to announce I am leaving the Washington Post in order to co-found with Norm an exciting new online platform, The Contrarian. We are going to bring you written material, podcasts, interviews, social media, all in defense of democracy. Our intent is to combat the authoritarian force that we all face.
We'll have a humor column. We'll even have a cooking column, but we're going to sprinkle in a little bit of pro-democracy flavor.
And we're going to have...
All right. I can't...
I have Mark Elias.
So that's who these people were. When they left the Washington Post, now the mask and... I mean, I guess she was doing that while she was at the Post, right? We're shunning these people. They shouldn't exist in polite society. Like, what the fuck? Like, how did anyone think that could possibly be a winning formula for retaining audience? And it's also just, again, it doesn't take into account any of the reasons why those voters might behave the way they did, right? And part of it is just the feeling of being looked down upon by nitwits like her.
Well, I dare not speak because someone chastised me in the comments for interrupting you, Matt. And
really,
and just as you earlier became abashed over, a factual error, I am now terribly abashed over my, because I hear it all the time, and sometimes it's true. So thank you for correcting me. And I will say this: the media in general, and the national media in particular, has spent a long time high on its own supply. It seemed there was a point a few years ago when it stopped worrying about the audience and started worrying about being acceptable in certain circles. The thing that I found most offensive in what she just said was the suggestion that the people are illiterate on the other side. They can't read. They don't read. She said the logical fallacy there is that there are readers, that they are readers.
Okay, can we be cruel for a moment and just talk about how she's maybe the worst writer in like American in American commentary? Like, I mean, her columns are unreadable to me. But go ahead.
In my case, they are not only unreadable, they are unread. She was correct in the sense that I don't read her. I don't see why I would. But that has been for many years now, from Stephen Colbert, to Jennifer Rubin, to Howard Stern, to a lot of the cable news, to a lot of the columnists at the New York Times and so on. The rule. We barely deign to address you because you were so far beneath us for various reasons, you illiterate, racist scumbags. That it was
remember the anti-vax Barbie where she was wearing a T-shirt that says like Moderna makes your teeth Jewish or something like that, right?
Right. I remember, I think it was in 2020 when Lady Gaga, on behalf of Joe Biden, imitated a MAGA voter. She stood next to a pickup truck in camo, and she crushed a beer can in her hand, and she was, practically, the hillbilly from Deliverance. Or we remember the Stroke and Page texts in which Stroke says he was in a Walmart in Virginia and he could smell the Trump voters. I don't know if you remember
right?
that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But that whole, you smell bad, you act bad, you don't have good teeth, you don't read, and that stuff really just reached a peak. And politics doesn't exist in a culture vacuum. I mean, Andrew Breitbart said it was downstream of culture. I don't know that that's true, but it certainly has to live inside of culture. And I think what we're seeing is an aesthetic change. We're just tired of that NPR attitude. We're tired of the elevated, condescending, mincing, and sniffy delivery. I just think we're burned out on it. You know, just as we got burned out on certain kinds of models, and then Sydney Sweeney comes waltzing in with, you know, hyper conventional beauty, let's say, and it looks like a revolution. A lot of this is people just getting tired of the same old style of presentation, and they're no longer breaking through the mind's crust. They're too much the same. They're too demeaning. They're too and the prestige or the exaltation that they felt they had earned has dribbled away as they have not done their jobs well. So they don't even have the substance behind their elevation. And so we're just watching the sea take a bunch of rubble back out to sea. And it's not really, I think, chiefly a political phenomena. We're watching people's shtick get old.
Yeah, but are they good? Are they going to just change the shtick, or are they going to try to water it down and make it less obvious? Because for most people, it was the shrillness and the absolute certainty that was conveyed by people like Rubin, like, these people must be expelled from society. It's the hectoring, the lecturing.
Fuck your freedom. Remember when Schwarzenegger said, "Fuck your freedom"?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly. And you know, you're right to bring up the word sadism with Stern, because it was always a slightly sadistic tone, right? And also the relentlessness of it. Like, I know people, when they watch Hollywood movies, like when I watch shows now, I wait. I figure in the first 9 minutes of every new Netflix series, I'm going to be chastised about 6 or 7 different views that I might still have. They're going to signal to me that the good characters are all one sort of person and the bad characters are all another sort of person. And, you know, and if I don't agree with that, then I'm not going to be able to watch the show. But it's constant. It's everywhere. It's that constant hectoring reminder that, you know, if you belong to this one kind of group, then you're villainous and need to be shunned. Are they going to get rid of that, or are they going to just disguise it better?
Well, there are certain, I mean, it has to do with economics, and it has to do with the niches they fill. If they can survive without changing, they probably will. But if they can't survive without changing, they will do what Jimmy Fallon just did last week, which was have Greg Gutfeld as a guest. I don't know if you saw that, but suddenly Jimmy Fallon, the conventional, you know, late night host on a network, The Tonight Show, had his competition, the competition that most of them pretend doesn't exist, Greg Gutfeld, who pulls superior ratings, on as a guest. So that marked a new decision on the part of NBC, Jimmy Fallon, and so on, to kind of, and we saw it a little tentatively with Saturday Night Live, I think, last season, when they allowed a little bit of satire of the, you know, Democratic establishment here and there. So I think they're testing the waters in terms of a retreat from orthodoxy. But you see, people are now a little bit changed from what they were. When I was teaching creative writing at University of Montana for many years and in other places, most short stories I would get from my students, you know, fictional stories, would include conflicts that were over things like love, a cruel person versus a thoughtful person, traditional universal dramas. Then I started getting short stories that were about somebody with the wrong political views getting their comeuppance. Oh, somebody who was not environmentalist enough, getting bitten by a bear, or somebody who had a little bit of racism or something in their makeup, getting talked down by their friends. And suddenly conflict became conflict over sentiment and opinion. And that isn't drama to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's debate. And so people
or
started.
it's just a foregone conclusion. It's not, it's just setup and delivery. There's no drama in there, right? I mean, the right people got, I mean, remember in The Importance of Being Earnest, who says it? She says, the good people are rewarded and the wicked are punished. That is what literature is, right? Remember, Wilde was sort of satirizing that, but that's what it became in this era. It's so predictable that the bad people are going to get it and the good people are going to win.
But of course, literature is absolutely not that. In
fact, of course, right.
As many have observed about the poem, the greatest poem in English, Paradise Lost, its hero is Satan, in a way. I mean, not its hero, but he gets the best lines and he has the most charisma and he's by far the most interesting character. That's true throughout Shakespeare. It's true in classical drama. Often the good are crushed in tragedy. In fact, it's almost defined as, good people being in some ways too proud, too arrogant, or whatever it is, and being destroyed. Nowadays, just simply enacting the comeuppance of people with wrong views can be looked at as drama. And it may be, but it's not entertaining. It's not gripping. It's not absorbing, and nor is it surprising. Just as you say, that's the formula now at the beginning of a Netflix show. It's the formula across news. News has become so moralistic. I mean, they give you the morals first now, and then they give you the news.
Right.
It used to be, I would watch the news as a kid, network news, and they had these poker-faced people. I mean, David Brinkley, who knew what he thought about anything? I mean,
yeah, it was fun to even imagine what he might be getting up to after it could be nothing. He could be like RoboCop and just turning himself off in a chair afterwards, or he could be partying all night long. You had no idea.
Exactly. And they would read the most horrifying stories about war or whatever it might be with this poker face. They'd give you little tiny gestures, winks, kind of tones of voice that might indicate editorial content going on in the back of their mind. But nowadays, before you've even seen that CBS thing about Trump and his announcement about Washington, you see that this is going to be a prosecution.
Right. We're going to check it for lies before it even happens. And it's wrong no matter what happens. And that shit just gets boring. It has nothing to do with Trump, actually. This is what people don't get about this whole period. Like, it's just this whole performance, this constant, unending performance and enacting of the same cycle. It just grates on you after a while. But we're starting to see the financial ramifications of it playing out, which is interesting because I don't see the political dynamic changing very much, but these companies have to survive. So what will they do? And is it possible that some of them will start reluctantly sliding back into reporting true things just because, that will actually work better for them financially? It could happen. I'm too much of an optimist.
But so far, what we're seeing are a lot of cake-filled retirement salute to your past parties without much change. In other words, they're all giving their, sayonara's and their farewells and their graduation speeches and their elegies to the great old golden days and walking off stage or preparing to. But I'm not seeing a new crew come in, not in those venues. They may simply be over with. Trump keeps saying that Jimmy Kimmel, is going to disappear from the airwaves. And in the old days, when he would say things like the late great New York Times or whatever it was that he would say that would sort of predict its downfall.
Yeah, the failing New York Times or
the
whatever.
Failing New York Times. It seemed egregious and wrong and in error and everything. Things are catching up. And it's the prosecutorial tone, I think, that finally bid them in. But it's finally also this. There's just too much choice for the old style ex cathedra standing atop the castle, telling the little people what to think model. And I'm not sure that they can adapt. I don't know that they can. Absent political power. See, when they have political power behind them and they have sort of other ways of gaining strength, when they're in the slipstream of deep state sentiment and so on, then maybe profits and numbers aren't as important to them because they're participating in the soft power exercise. But when they don't have this augmentation by soft power, they just look a little bit like they're failing.
Yeah. Yep. And they are. So it's interesting. We'll see where all this goes. The heads continue to roll, and what that means going forward for all these for the information landscape is hard to see. But I think we were on to something last week, Walter, with this notion that the real battle is over how the algorithms are going to be put together, whether the AI is going to be structured in a way that is going to be on the audience's side, or whether it's going to be against the audience. And that still remains to be seen. Like, I think the human beings that suck the worst are being rooted out fairly quickly. But underneath them is a layer of computing power that is growing. And so that's something to be conscious of.
Yeah, I explained what I thought was one of our best shows, which was last Friday's, because we really went deep and got profound on the AI question, but in a way that I think was legitimate and fact-based. And I said to my wife, because how could she can't really afford to listen to this show, because that means that, she's listening to be drone on in real life and on a computer. So
no, that would be intolerable.
Yeah, intolerable. So I said to her, here's the headline. The audience is no longer people. The audience is the AI. And that's who they're really addressing, because they're hoping to engrave these opinions, these conclusions, and maybe even these what they call facts into the composite mind. And they aren't even talking to you anymore. They're talking past you. You're just there in some legacy butt-sitting exercise, thinking that they're actually addressing your little mind inside your skull when they're talking over your shoulder to Grok.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's right. That's why some of the schadenfreude about all these people losing their jobs, I get it. But
then again, they had the jobs forever. They had the jobs much longer than actual performance reviews conducted in any normal way would have allowed them to have. Right. In no other industry would they have gone on for so long at such high levels.
Right. And that's how they survived unnaturally. And that's why things like the Russiagate thing continue, because you can just keep cranking this stuff out as long as the machine says it's supported. So But we talked about it last week. I think we should go back to that topic, though. I want to do some more research on it, and go a little deeper on what that process is with AI, because I haven't looked at it in seriousness since probably the middle of last year. So I think we should definitely revisit that topic as this becomes more important. Anyway, so we did want to wrap up Candide today, and I think we have a little bit of an interesting discussion here, because after sort of spending most of the last episode laughing at how funny this book was, it ends on kind of a strange note with a strange message. Walter, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
Well, so yes, the last part of Candide, and I reiterate to everyone, I'm reading it along with you. It was a book that I had not familiarized myself with until these last couple of weeks. The last movement of Candide is as you say, a little bit thoughtful and slow and contemplative. And after all of the farcical Three Stooges, ultra-violence, Monty Python style, ultra-violence and suffering and horror of the earlier part, it turns into Candide's quest to reunite with Cunigund, the girlfriend, the true love. And, he chases her across several countries. He goes to England to try to find her. He finds out finally she's in Constantinople. On the way to catching up with her finally, he has one particular dinner with a bunch of deposed kings in Venice.
6 of them.
6 of them. And he realizes, there's Edward the something of England, and then there's a Russian noble, and there's another one, and they're all poor by this time. And what's interesting is Candide spends the last part of the book rich, okay? Because of this brief visit to El Dorado in South America, his pockets are full of diamonds. And so he can commandeer any ship. He can help any poor person. He can hire any friend. And he kind of hires on this philosopher who's the counterpart of Pangloss earlier.
Martin.
Mm-hmm. Martin. And Martin is a pessimist in the way that Pangloss was an optimist. Martin really is a cynic. He sees through everything. He expects nothing from life except unhappiness and disappointment. And at one time, Candide and he see a couple that appear to be very happy, and Candide says, "Oh, at last, we've seen a happy couple." And Martin says, "I'll bet you that if you look into it, they're miserable."
Right. Right.
And it turns out, in fact, that the couple consists of a prostitute who's in a terrible situation and pretending to be happy, and a guy who's also unhappy. And then they meet the kings. And so it becomes the vanity of human wishes. Is there any such thing as happiness anywhere in the world? Well, Candide is convinced there is if he can only reunite with Cunigund, his long lost love. And when he finds her, what has happened? Oh, well.
She's lost her looks. Let's put that in a polite way.
She's lost her looks.
And he desperately does not want to marry her, but being a man of honor, he announces his intention to do so. At which point, Cunigund's brother, who has reappeared at the end of the story, even though Candide has already killed him once for objecting to the idea of Candide marrying Cunigund, he now objects again, even though Cunigund is an old woman, and is no longer the beauty she once was, and he's kind of doing her a favor by marrying her. He objects and says, "How dare you? You're nobody in social stature to be marrying her." And anyway, they move past that. he eventually does marry Cunegonde. And then there's this passage in the book where Voltaire writes, "It is natural to imagine that after so many disasters, Candide married, and living with the philosopher Pangloss, the philosopher Martin, the prudent Cacambo, and the old woman, having besides brought so many diamonds from the country of the ancient Incas, must have led a very happy life." But no, right? They aren't particularly happy. And the old woman has this comment, this very pointed comment toward the end. She says, "I want to know which is worse, to be ravished 100 times by Negro pirates, to have a buttock cut off, to run the gauntlet among the Bulgarians, to be whipped and hanged at an auto da fe, to be dissected, to row in the galleys, in short, to go through all the miseries we have undergone, or to stay here and have nothing to do." It is a great question, says Candide. And you know what? And then at the end, sort of without answering the question really, Voltaire dismounts into this what feels to me like a cliche. The famous term in French, if we can show it, is il faut what is it? Il faut cultiver notre jardin. We must cultivate our garden. And basically the end of the story is that, yeah, life sucks, but we should just go on. We should just work without expectations, and we must cultivate our garden. And I don't know, Walter, it feels like a false note at the end to me. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's a very traditional note. I had a professor at Princeton, a guy named Seth Lehrer, whose key text was a book called The Consolations of Philosophy by a medieval philosopher theologian called Boethius. And Boethius's conclusion about life was that it's a horror show, it's disappointing. When you're up, you're about to go down. When you're down, you're about to go up, but only to go down again. There's only one final good, reliable source of gratification, and that's thought. That's basically cultivating your own garden, retiring from the world to your meditations. Samuel Johnson, the great English, lexicographer and wit, wrote a book called Rasselas, which also came to this conclusion. Rasselas might have been right about the time of Candide or a little later. I'm not sure. You kind of go to your happy valley. You go to the, you go into the sunset, and you tend your farm. And that Voltaire, after this outrageous first 2/3, should come to the same conclusion is a little disappointing. He's been so iconoclastic. He's been so out of control and edgy that for him to say, "Oh, tend your garden, lower your expectations, retire from the world," is all that we were expecting something more. And Martin even sort of codifies this and says, well, in life, you're either on an adventure and you're suffering from, the pain and agonies that come in with adventure, or you're bored. And it's as though Voltaire sort of comes down on the side of being bored. As you say, it's an extremely traditional view that goes back to the ancients. And I think you're right. There's a strange way in which this last part of the book doesn't fit the rest of it, because it's almost Christian. You see the kings, and none of the kings are happy. Look at the mighty. The first shall be last. Voltaire in many ways was an anti-clerical, anti-religious, anti-Christian thinker. And here he seems to be agreeing with Jesus that it's better to be humble. It's, a rich man can't go to heaven. And let's just, and so let's just be quiet, gentle, and stay in, stay out of the way of the big winds and blusters and flurries of life. I too felt a little let down. To be honest, I did.
So when I read this, or when I reread this, I guess one of the thoughts I had is, ending with this weird, sort of vague metaphor in a book that was so full of sort of rapier, sharp observations and lightning fast action. It felt completely off key. So what did it remind me of? I mean, if we can show it, there's a scene from the movie Being There, and this is Jerzy Kosinski's hero, Chance the gardener, who mistakenly becomes a person of great influence. When he's actually talking about gardening, they all think that he's talking about something deep. And this is a scene where Jack Warden, who's an important sort of politician, is asking his opinion on the economics.
Mr. Garner, do you agree with Ben, or do you think we can stimulate growth through temporary incentives?
As long as the roots are not severed, all is well, and all will be well in the garden.
In the garden?
Yes. In a garden, growth has its season. First comes spring and summer.
Okay, all right. I can't watch anymore. So this is why I can't. I love that movie. I love that scene. But in the context of Voltaire, where the whole book is this rollicking rocket of a story, to have it end on that note, and that's essentially what it is, isn't it? I mean, am I missing something? Yes, tend to your business and live out your. I mean, it's not actually even a message that I disagree with. Like, in the end, just live your life and do your best and put one foot in front of the other, and you know what, it's not so bad. I think it's a dramatic mistake. Like I think Voltaire got so wrapped up in his own head at the end of the book that what he should have done is just ended it in some kind of painful crash or some bizarre, I don't know, dismount where all the bodies end up in a pile and there's a laugh line at the end. Like, to me, that's the only way that book should have ended. I don't buy this ending.
Well, as I say, it's a traditional ending because the last third of it is about the folly of riches, for example. We're shown over and over that the fact that he has unlimited diamonds in his pocket, only gets him ripped off and in more trouble. It doesn't bring satisfaction. We're showed that the kings, despite their thrones, have no permanent exalted state. They will be laid low. Everything will be laid low. Now, this is 1759. The French Revolution is going to come not that far from now, and Voltaire will be thought of as a father of the French Revolution. In some ways, I think what he's doing is that he's caught himself. He suddenly is talking about the common man. Basically, he's a little bit like Tolstoy at the end of his career, suddenly deciding the only thing you can do is be a peasant and tend to your own plantation, basically.
Right. Cut your own resolute path through life, as with a scythe, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a little like when Bob Dylan, after his speed freak decade of the 1960s, decides to move to a farm in Woodstock, New York, and do the basement tapes. after a lot of stimulation, after a lot of experiment, a lot of adventure, you come to Earth on the, little homestead. It's a little like the Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And maybe that's the price of narratives that go too far out, that they always tend to return to a rather schmaltzy protected space and a philosophy.
But I don't think that's necessary, though. Like,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't happen in Catch-22.
It doesn't happen in Catch-22. Like we did the Metamorphosis, where it sort of ends, and then the sister stretches out her young body. Like, an abrupt end to a great story works, I always think, and it's much better than ending on a false note. Or I don't know. Maybe it's not a false note. It's just a weird note for this book, which is rollicking, confident, and funny. I don't know.
It is, but in a story, in order to tell it, you have to set certain parameters, and they govern it. But they can become your enemy at the end, I know, as a novelist. And some of the parameters that he's set that I think cripple him in terms of an ending are these. His main characters can't die. Okay, no matter what happens to them, they don't die. Pangloss gets hung but survives and wakes up during a dissection.
Yeah, that was funny, that part. Yeah.
Candide can't die. None of them expire for good. And so when you've knocked out the ability of having your hero destroyed, then you've basically got to leave them somewhere. Happily ever after. You have no choice. The other thing that he's done is that he has over and over told us that optimism, expecting that everything be perfect, is ridiculous. But he's not willing to go with the pessimism of Martin either. For some reason, the ending that I thought was natural was for Candide to lose his goodness, become misanthropic, become,
sadistic, or
a terror of disappointed, cynical thought. And there's a character in the book who is that way, and it's a Venetian aristocrat who Candide meets about 3 chapters before the end. And this is a man who has everything, and he has a big library of books, and he basically goes through all the classics, including like Homer and Milton and so on, and says, and all the philosophers, and runs them down. They're talking about a bunch of nothing. This is boring. That story is flawed, and so on. And he is the critic, the person who's perpetually disappointed, the aristocrat whose tastes are so refined that no one can live up to them. And in a weird way, that I felt was the Voltaire-like position. I felt like that was Voltaire. And Candide, he just had sort of used up as a puppet for all this other stuff. And he just had to set him down somewhere. But he did not give him much of a lesson at all, except stay where you are and don't leave.
Yeah, I guess so. I can live with it, but it's not my favorite ending to a book. Let's put it that way. I love the book overall, though. What I'll say is, I think it's a model for how future satires were written, and he was roughly also a contemporary with Swift, who approached his subject matter with a similar mindset. Just Voltaire was much more of much more economical in the way he wrote, although Swift was a very entertaining and gifted writer too, right? I just felt, I don't know, something was off about the end here for me. But overall, it's a book that makes you laugh at the pretensions of everything, and makes you realize that there almost anything that you think is going to be some kind of intellectual solace is going to turn out to be a false door in the end, right? And I would have preferred, like, some other consolation in the end. I mean, you mentioned John Lennon, like, all he needed is love. I think that would have been a good ending for the story, right? Like, when there's nothing else in life, there's at least that. But he doesn't even really go there. But overall, I love the book.
Yeah. Well, as I say, the adventures of the rock and roll adventurer often end up, in the retirement home. And that's kind of how this ends. And I think Voltaire himself, who was a kind of a provincial child of a minor nobility and a bourgeois parent and an aristocratic parent, made a huge show of himself. He was an internationally famous, almost uniquely acclaimed character. He was a dramatist. He was a bit like Shakespeare or something, if Shakespeare had, been a public person. And he was at almost past the height of his fame when he wrote this. So I think it has the color of a person who is retiring from an incredibly controversial public life. And that biographical note overwhelms the narrative itself. I think Voltaire was a little tired of his public performance by this time.
Yeah, I guess so. One of our commenters, and I can't even pronounce this, Adichat Sound Bobkawa 5328 says, definitely can see echoes of Candide and the Python stuff. Really, the entire Monty Python's Flying Circus and the movies, Life of Brian, the Holy Grail, maybe even, all of that is Candide. All they did is take every single ridiculous idea from the past and lampoon them with sort of equal brutality, right? So Christianity, Princess Bride too, right? Yeah. But yeah, everything from the Inquisition to let he who is without sin cast the first stone, to the witch hunts, to all of it. They all got sent up, and those sort of brilliant Cambridge and Oxonian wits. This is the kind of thing that they would do. Is they would take those ideas and sort of take them apart, and all you have to do is come up with some surface conceit satirically, and it falls down pretty quickly. But what Voltaire did at his time, I think, was unique. I don't think anyone had been irreverent to that degree before, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of anyone who compares, and apart from Swift, Joe. Who was it who wrote Pamela? Is it Fielding, right?
Lawrence, a little bit like Lawrence Stern, Tristram Shandy.
Stern, but that was later, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but books that remind me of Candide, Huckleberry Finn, strangely. I think ending the philosophical novel is always a problem. Think about how Douglas Adams did it with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They're looking for the answer. They're looking for the final solution. They're looking for the key to the puzzle. And what is it? What, 42? Was that the answer to what the meaning of life was at the end?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. He just makes a joke of how impossible it is to fulfill that expectation. And I think by the time Voltaire had set it all up, he realized that maybe he had created a difficult expectation to satisfy. But as far as the humor at its peak, about, I don't know, chapter 20 or so, it's unmatched for anarchy, for bitterness, for absurdist comedy, and
erudition too, right?
And erudition, and there is a joke, per paragraph that has never worn out. Whether it's giving the Buenos Aires, Don all the different names, or the whole catalog of sexual insults to some of the poor heroines.
Even Kunigon's brother in the end sort of offhandedly mentions that he nearly suffers capital punishment for bathing naked with a Muslim, and he tells a totally unconvincing story about how they came to be like both naked and bathing at the same time. It's just a very funny passage. He when he just lets go, it's all incredibly funny. But anyway, I thought that was a really fun book, great book, and enlightening in a lot of ways. Well, I guess it should be enlightening, right? He's the father of the Enlightenment. But very fun to do with you, Walter, and we'll have to put our heads together to think of what book to do next. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us on what will probably turn out to be kind of a bummer of a show looking back. But look, in all seriousness,
people in the comments have said I refuse to acknowledge the mistake. I haven't refused to acknowledge it at all. I just, based on the two pieces of evidence I had, I haven't yet been able. I think Matt gets more information at his terminal than I do over here. I happily acknowledge the mistake if it was one, but
no, I'm more pissed off at the PD, but I should double check it before
at the police department. Yeah. When the police department misinforms you, you don't think that there's someone beyond them that you should be checking with.
Right, but you gotta. It's look. That's part of the whole deal. Is you got to own it when you get it wrong, and so I am owning it. I should have checked and didn't, but here to tell you that when that does happen, we'll let you know. So thanks everybody for hanging in with us, and we'll have a happier, less ridiculous show next time, and see you again soon.